What's up, everybody? Joe Everest, the fence expert. We're here at Ozark Fence. We're going to build a little bit of a display or a demo section here. One, because this fence doesn't look great, and two, we want to show the difference in how we build with wood post versus steel post, the Postmaster post, but also how we do our Shark hardware with our steel frame gates. We're talking that if we're doing this anyways, we might as well bring you guys along. So we've already got our string line laid out. Basically, what we're wanting to do is act as if this is the neighbor's fence. We're going to continue this line out until we get to the end of our section. Now, if you guys will probably notice, we've got utilities here nearby. We've got AT&T Digital here. We've already double checked, and we'll double check for you guys again that our line is not going to come within 2 foot of the marking line. It's that 2 foot safety zone. Is that right, Scott?
That is correct. And I think we are plenty. We are at 3 feet.
Yep. Yeah, so we're about 3 foot off that line, which means even if we were to dig right on the line, half again the width of the bit, we're still
not our fault.
Plenty of room.
Yep.
Now for this fence, we know we're actually digging on this side of the line. The center of the hole is going to be
right
3 foot plus. We
right.
should be completely clear.
If it's marked correctly, yes.
Have we ever hit a line that was not correctly marked?
Of course.
Of course.
Of course.
But this is what we have to go off of. Yeah. We've got markings on the ground with flags. We're going to say 2 foot off of those, give them some buffer. We should be totally safe.
We should be fine.
Now, like I said, we're going to treat this like the neighbor's fence. So the problem is we've got a footer here. We've got a concrete post. For the sake of this demonstration, we're not bringing it up. We're actually going to set a post right next to it. So this is going to be one of our this is going to be our 4x4. Yep. But we've got this gap here. Right, so say we've got dogs or kids, this gap, we don't want it anyway. So what are we going to do to address the fact that we can't get the post all the way against our neighbor's fence?
So we're running on 8 foot centers. So what we're going to do is we're going to come out a little bit away from that concrete because we know sometimes it mushrooms out. Sure. We'll make a mark there, and that'll be our starting point. And then we'll overlay our 2x4s up to it. That way we do not have to nail onto the neighbor's fence.
Yeah, since this is a wood post, we can actually go past the post, cantilever the rail out past the post, cover it with pickets, and no one from the outside would be the wiser that the post isn't on the edge of that.
Yep.
So Justin, let's put our first mark here.
A little bit off.
Okay. All right, well, now let's talk about that. So Justin just measured a couple inches off the line. Why aren't we marking right on the line?
Well, we're pretty close. Now, I'm going to center that, and when I'm digging with my auger, it's going to grind out the other side.
Okay.
So we're good there.
Well, and one thing too, I think that we're accounting for is that this is the finished side, right? This is the finished line, where this is the face of it. So we know we've got a 2x4 and a post, so we know we need to come off that a little bit when we're digging.
Right. Now, I know everybody does it different,
sure.
But with a 3-man crew, Justin's usually in front of me marking, and I've got another guy right behind him, so that my auger, the tip of my auger will make shorter holes.
Okay, yeah.
All the way down.
It's kind of making a pilot hole. If we were drilling wood, we'd drill a pilot hole to make sure the big bit goes exactly where we want.
And we'll find out if we're on a boulder or a tree root, and we may make adjustments if we have to.
All right, so what is our next measurement? So the next measurement is going to be our gate post.
Right. So we know we've got we know we've got a 7 foot 10 section going in here, Justin.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that real quick, Scott. 7'10". Okay. Now, typically on wood fence, we talk about 8 foot centers.
I've seen guys with Postmasters and using the Shark hinges try to measure things exact. We don't. I'll saw off 2 inches all the time to make things faster.
Giving yourself a 2-inch buffer.
2-inch wiggle room. Yep. Okay. That's what I usually do.
You hit roots or rocks or whatever.
Yep. So we're at 7'10".
Okay.
And we know that's going to be a gate post in this yard.
All right, Scott. So this is actually going to be our single gate opening. Yeah. Now we know our gate frame measures 4 foot wide exactly. What is our opening going to measure?
Okay, we're going to measure this out for digging purposes. We're going to measure this out at 4'8".
Okay.
Give myself a little bit of wiggle room. I've got an 8-inch auger, so.
Well, and we're allowing 8 inches for hardware, right? So that allows for your Shark hinge and your Shark latch. Yep. If you've got a 4 foot gate, it'll be 4'8".
It'll stretch out to 4 foot, 7.5, 8 inch.
Sure. Now, and here's the important part too, is we're going to measure, when we set these posts, we're going to measure it from the inside of one post to the inside of the next post. is going to be our 4'8". It's not going to be a center measurement. It's going to be an inside measurement.
It's not going to be exact, and not everybody's going to have an 8-inch auger to drill with.
Sure.
They may be hand digging them. Like if that's my center point to center point, I may be bumped out a little bit here or there to make sure I get concrete all the way around the post.
Yeah, well, that's fair. You don't really want to get into a point where you've got to set a post on the edge of the hole.
Yeah.
You want concrete to completely
All the way
encapsulate
around
the
it.
post.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got our 4'8" gate opening here. We're going to go one more section. Now this section we're actually going to go to a postmaster post to show what it looks like using Shark hardware with postmasters. What's our measurement here?
And again, we're going to go 7'10".
Okay.
It's 8-foot panels. We stick with 7'10". Gives us a little wiggle room.
2-inch wiggle room.
Yep. Not everybody's going to do it.
Well, I think that's fair to say. Like, this is how we build the fence. There's probably a million different ways to build this fence.
There are several.
This is what works for us.
This makes us go fast.
All right, so we've got our 4 posts marked out. We've got a 4x4. We've got 2.5-inch round. They're going to be schedule 40. And we've got our Postmaster Plus post ready to go here.
Yep.
The only thing left to do is dig them out.
That's it.
I love Postmaster. All right, Scott, so let's talk about depth for a second.
Okay.
So our goal is 30 inches,
That's our goal.
which ASTM standards and all that, 30 inches is our goal, which in our area is below our frost line depth.
Right.
So the general rule of thumb is 6 inches below frost depth. Here in Greene County, the Ag Department says our frost depth is 20 inches.
20 inches.
26, but we go for the 30 to be closer to the ASTM standard, to meet ASTM standards.
We try. We're just in a very rocky area.
Right. Well, and so let's talk about that. So if this were a full-scale job, you drill as much as you can get the first go-round,
right,
while continuing through, because you've got a couple guys here ready to try to
whether you
break rock or roots.
Yep. Whether you got one guy or two guys,
sure,
he's still working the holes as I'm going around the rest of the house or the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then because we were talking a little bit before we started recording, because sometimes it's just one rock that you can break and move out of the way,
yep,
or there's a root that these guys can chop. You're done with your holes, you come back around, they'll flag you down on holes that need more depth.
I've got, well, yeah, so typically when they're cleaned out and done, all the posts are laid out. They're putting the posts in the holes that are done.
Okay.
Ones that aren't, the post is still laying on the ground, letting me know that I can come back and start working on it again.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's a great visual. All right, so Scott, let's kick a hornet's nest real quick and talk about concrete.
Boy.
Now, this is the portion of the video where we will reemphasize that there are many ways to do this, and there are many ways that work.
And they mostly all work.
That's the thing, is could we call in a ready mix truck for this?
Probably.
Sure. For 4 holes, we're gonna have to dump the rest of that concrete somewhere, right? It's less than the minimum.
But even that, if it's 300-foot job, do we want a ready mix truck here when I've got a machine with forks? I can drop all these, yeah.
Yeah, this is the discussion. Or can we dry compact it?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I've seen it work, I know it works.
Yep.
Our process for our company,
yep,
take that for what it will, you two, for what it's worth, is we're gonna add some water to the bottom of the hole.
We're gonna put a little bit at the bottom.
We're gonna add the concrete.
Yep.
We're gonna add water to the top of the hole.
Yep.
And then we're gonna stab it to mix the
We're gonna pull it up a little bit and go back down, and then we're gonna kick dirt around it, and then we're going to stomp our dirt and get a firm handle on the post.
Because we're installing this as if we're installing residential fence.
Yes.
Now, if we're installing a commercial fence where there's a specification,
different,
completely different conversation.
Yep.
Right? There's not a spec. This is residential grade. This is how we would normally install a 6-foot privacy fence in somebody's backyard, and how we've been installing it since 1955. Okay, so on subject to concrete, very quickly, we're using a Quikrete product,
right?
Pre-bagged, pre-mixed,
Ready to go.
so that we know that the concrete mix in every hole is going to be consistent.
Ready to go.
Now in the past, when I was a kid, we would mix raw material. We'd take each ingredient separately, mix them, then pour them in the hole as well.
Which works
It works, but what it led to was inconsistencies.
Yep.
Right? Two different people shoveling at two different ratios led to inconsistent concrete.
You and I could shovel wheelbarrows consistent every time.
Sure.
But when you got guys coming and going in and out of the rotation of working in the backyard.
Because that was typically the new guy.
Yeah.
The new guy was up on the trailer mixing concrete,
Usually,
which
yeah.
is probably what led to some of the problems.
We all start somewhere.
That's right. But this gets us consistent concrete, hole to hole. It's going to meet the PSI that's on the bag.
Yep.
We know for a fact that these holes will be set.
Yep.
All right, so as the guys are distributing concrete, we're talking that if this was a normal job, you would have had forks on the Bobcat and already had the concrete fairly distributed once they get finished.
More than likely, you guys are still cleaning out holes. I've already taken my auger off, gotten forks, and they've most of the concrete's already been dropped.
You guys are basically following each other around. Now, let's talk about the Quikrete. They're 60-pound bags.
Yep.
We used to use 80-pound bags.
We recently switched a couple months ago, and I think basically the most reason is for our backs.
Sure. Yeah.
I've done 80-pound bags for years and years, and a lot of guys out there have. I think this is healthier in the long run.
And you're getting a little bit more concrete. We're using a bag and a half.
Yep.
So math tells us we're getting about 90 pounds a hole rather than the 80 pounds.
If there's an extra 10 pounds, the bag just keeps on going down the line.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure. So same product to the customer, maybe possibly a bit more concrete in the hole, but it's also saving the guys' backs.
Yep.
It's a win-win. All right, Scott, so while Justin's getting us all plumb here, I do see that we're off this line. Run us through one more time why we're off the line and how far off the line we are.
Okay, well, this is a 4x4. Unlike a Postmaster, we're not as close to the line. We're gonna be about a 2x4 and pick it off.
Okay.
So that we're gonna match up to what the neighbors got.
Got it. So we know we're giving ourselves room for the 2x4 and the picket and not bumping that line
otherwise, if he puts this on the line, then all of a sudden my 2x4 and picket are out here, I'm not matching up to that corner.
You're a couple inches outside that. Very good. All right, Scott, so here we are at the first gate post. Now, again, we're setting this a little bit off the line because we've got a wood to steel bracket.
We're gonna allow for the wood to steel bracket, and we're gonna allow for the 2x4.
And it's specific to this bracket, right? There's L brackets,
We've got some brackets that are completely flat with the post, and you don't have to worry about the 1 inch right there.
These are the ones we like using, the wood to steel brackets for 2.5 inch posts.
They're quick and easy. Yep.
You can find them on noseyfence.store. So we're making sure we've got enough room for our bracket, the bolt, and also the 2x4 while still not bumping this line out. Let's talk about orientation real quick. So we've got the top hat portion facing the finish side. That way it's easier to cover as we're running pickets over.
Right.
Now, how would we do this if we were going to run, well, and let's talk about offset. So the top hat is roughly the width of a picket off of the line. So that allows our 2x4 to sit in here. The picket can sit on top and we're still not pushing the line.
Yeah, if there was an eighth or something, you're never going to see it in a 300-foot line.
All right, so let's talk about corners. How would you handle it? You being Scott, how would you handle it if we were to turn this 90 degrees if we were going back over to the building?
So some guys with this post will be just like where Justin's at right now.
Okay.
And they'll stop there, and that'll be their end. And then now we're going this way. And then they'll take the 2x4 and they'll try to do that.
Okay.
And then I'm trying to corner.
You got a gap.
I've got to corner that off with a picket. So the best way and the strongest way is just like that.
Okay.
So now I'm butting up to the end. I'll use longer screws on that end.
Okay.
And then we'll be over here going this direction, and I'm screwed in regular screws going that way.
And you can corner it off with pickets, so it'll look really nice, so you don't have that void sitting right there.
And it's going to be stronger. Yeah.
Got it. All right, Scott, so the poster's set. Now we're going to get the Quikrete. Typically, we'd give them a day and a half, 2 days to cure.
Summertime.
It happens to be a Friday.
Yep.
And right now, temperatures are mid-70s, something like that. So we're going to give it till first part of next week, come back and nail this. Now, typically what you'd see, if this were a production job, if it was on our schedule, we'd set it on either a Monday or Tuesday, nail it that Thursday, Friday. So set Monday, nail Thursday, set Tuesday, nail Friday.
In the summertime, 2 days, perfect.
So that leaves Wednesday open for flex, to where if it were going to rain, we could have moved this job around a little bit.
That's right.
So typically we'll give them a couple days to cure, just to be super sure that it's exactly where we want it to be.
Add another day in the winter if possible, or no?
No, that is a different subject. Typically, it's also slower in the wintertime work-wise, so I'm not setting as many. I'm not as in quite the rush to get back to the customer's house to get to another customer's house.
But to answer the question, I mean, we would though. We would add at least a day.
At least a day.
Yeah.
And it depends on is it freezing or is it just 40?
Or if we got a downpour.
Yeah.
Like if it poured for the next 2 days, we'd add days on. To account for just the extra rain. The concrete's not going to want to cure as quickly when it's just completely saturated.
And I could demolish somebody's yard, a nicer yard. I could demolish with 3 guys and a machine out there.
Well, I mean, this is probably a good point too. Is that so? It rained a ton last night. It hadn't rained at all today, but the ground's a little springy. Right. So we made some tracks here to where, if this was a production job, we'd probably come in and we'd probably rake it a little bit, try to spring it back up.
We'll fluff it up, make it look pretty again.
But if it was much worse, if it's much wetter, it probably would be worse.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So that's part of the drawback of using equipment. It's really great for handling, pallets of Quikrete and digging holes, but you're also limited to what yards you can get into in spring and fall.
I have to think about it constantly in the rainy season with the customer.
Well, we've had to reschedule a few projects, just saying, hey, we know you just have a recently sodded yard.
New sod.
It's really wet. We know we're going to destroy it, so we're going to bump this back a week or whatever it is.
Safer that way.
So there's a lot of discretion that comes to this as well. All right, we're going to let this set for a few days. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about nailing it up, putting shark hardware on, the wood to steel brackets, the whole thing. We're going to make this look nice.
There you go.
All right, guys, through the magic of YouTube editing, it's a few days later and these posts are set up and ready to go. Now, before we can build the gate, we've got to build the fence so that the gate has some support on it. Now, Scott, to attach the wood fence to these round steel posts, we're going to use the wood to steel adapters.
Right.
So these are Nationwide Industries. If you guys watch the channel, you actually saw Scott and the crew replace some fence over at Kansas Station using these. They're Nationwide Industries wood to steel adapters. We like them a lot. You can buy them from any of your favorite nationwide suppliers, including ozfence.store. So, Scott, run us through, how do you know exactly where to place these brackets?
Well, I know everybody does things a little different, but for me, I used a stick to get myself close to my height.
Okay.
So, I'm going to set mine at about 66.5.
Okay, 66.5.
Knowing that's the top of my 2x4.
Okay. Now, the terrain here varies a little bit.
Right.
It rises, if any, but it rises a little bit. So what we're likely going to see, or what we will see on the fence, is that top line follows the grade ever so slightly.
Yeah, I'm positive that'll probably be completely level, but we will come up the incline just an inch or two.
Sure.
Yeah.
The other way to do this might be like a stair-step approach. If this were a longer fence, some people might want to keep the top level.
Yeah.
And so then you would see the stair step where it would rise. But we like to follow the grade. That way it looks more contoured so that every post is marked at 66.5.
Looks much better that way.
Now let's pause here for a second. If this was a longer line, you would likely mark this all out, but then step back and kind of adjust post to post.
I've done it long enough to where I can notice the humps and get an idea of when I'm going to move it up an inch or two.
Gotcha. Yeah. But you always start at the 66.5 and then go plus or minus depending on
I can change it every post I go to. That's correct.
Well, now that we've got the specifics outlined, Let's build the fence.
Let's do it.
All right, Scott, so we've got the fence framed out, ready to put the gate in. Before we do that, let's talk about what's in the box. So we've got a shark hinge and shark latch. This is our preferred way of hanging gates. It takes a connection from the steel frame, steel hardware to the steel post. We're not relying on a wood or a natural product to try to hold it. Shameless plug, available at ozfence.store. What's in the box? So we've got a single gate. So we've got a single gate shark latch kit. We've got, of course, our latch. It attaches with a U-bolt to your latch post. Now, it'll either be up for swinging the gate out. You can also reverse it for swinging the gate in, depending on what your scenario is. Also comes with a handle latch combo. Has pre-drilled holes so that you could pre-drill the gate frame. We typically do run a bolt through to a nut on the other side. You could also use a steel to steel self-tapping screw. Now for the hinges, one box, it covers one side of a gate. We need one box because we've got a single gate.
Okay.
If this were a double gate, we would have two boxes of the hinges. We got, again, U-bolts, heavy duty this time because it's supporting a lot of weight. On the other side, we've got pre-welded nuts on the actual hinge itself so that the supplied bolts can go through the gate frame. You would need to drill the frame out through the frame into the pre-welded nuts. Now, depending on what size gate frame you have, you might need to trim off the bolt on the other side so that when it's in the fully closed position, it sits nice and flush. All that being said, let's throw it on.
Easy.
All right, so we've got the holes pre-drilled on our gate frame. We also have the 2x4s pre-mounted. We know this side is going to be facing out because the smooth side, the pretty side on this fence is going to be facing out as well. So we know our hinges are going to be oriented to where the pin, the hinge pin, is also going to be facing out. When we're done, the only part of this hinge we should see will be this hinge pin, but it's important to note it will be visible. These aren't a hidden fastener type system. If we were swinging it in, easy peasy, we'd flip the gate hinge around. The pin always faces the direction of the way the gate's swinging. So again, we still have our pre-drilled holes, bolt the hinge to the frame, swing it whichever direction this pin's facing. All right, guys, so let's talk about the gate frame for a second. This is an 1.5 inch square galvanized steel gate frame. We build these in-house at a fabrication shop. If you guys have watched the show, you've met Matt already. To explain more about the gate, how we build them, let's throw it to Matt.
Thanks, Joe. We're over here in the shop and we're going to be talking about how to throw together a gate for the shark hinges and the shark latch. I figured it'd be two good talking points. One would be the takeoffs, the distance in between the post and the gate frame, and kind of give you just an up-close view of that. And then the second talking point would be basically where to fabricate the holes in the frame so that the shark hardware can be adapted to the frame and then put on the post. So we'll go over and talk about the first one. Here we have the shark hinge, and it's made to adapt onto a 2.5 inch outside diameter post. It comes with a hinge and then a U-bolt. It's actually pretty handy. It's got the U-bolt and basically just an impact that you can get around. I believe that this one is a 7/8 inch nut. They've got a cutout here for you to be able to put your impact in here and tighten them up. And I think the easiest way to do it would be to actually put the hinges onto the gate frame first, and then have somebody help you hold the gate frame with the hinges on it up to the post to get the U-bolts around the back side of the post. So you got the hinge here, and then the other part is the latch. Now they make two different types of latches. This particular one that you're looking at is for a single gate, and really the main difference between a single and a double is that the single will attach to a post, again 2.5 inch, and the double will actually basically just be this section here without attaching to the post. So it just goes to one of the frames of the gate. But really, when you buy the Shark hardware or the Shark setup, you're going to want to account for how much space is in between the hinge and the latch. So for a single latch, basically just go from inside of the post just past the outside of here. We call it about 3.5 inches, and that's a good, just a good area for the gate to come in here and swing. Each one comes with the latch and then also this handle slash striker bar. It's basically 2-in-1, and this would get mounted to the actual gate frame, and then as your gate opens and closes, the striker bar is what connects to the latch. And they should be able to show you back on the other side kind of what that looks like when it's all put up. So we just went over the takeoffs for a single latch, and we decided that's about 3.5 inches from the inside of the post to where you want your gate frame to hit. And this is the single latch. If you're going to buy Shark hardware for a double drive kit, it's going to include the double drive latch. The only difference in between the two is that this one attached to the post, this one's set up to attach to one of the frames of your double drive. And essentially, you have square tube. We use 1.5 by 1.5 square tube for our gate frames. And they come with these holes back here to self-tap them with your choice of metal screw. And it would sit on the gate frame, and then this one would sit on your other gate frame, and they would come together and connect that way. So when you're looking at this and you're measuring, you got about 1 inch, give or take, maybe a little more. Basically be from the inside of this square tube on over, which you can see is about 1 inch, maybe a little bit more. But that would be the main difference in between the single latch and the double latch. So now that we have the latches measured out, we want to look at the hinge. And if it's a single gate, you're only going to have one set of hinges. So you could just look at it this way and go from the inside of the post on out to the outside of this, which is about 3.5 inches. So we now know that the hinge is going to be about 3.5 inches. The single latch is going to be about 3.5 inches. That gives us to a total takeoff of 7 inches. And that's going to be pretty tight. So we normally do ours about 7.5. And that allows for a lot of different variables. And it makes a pretty good fit. So we say 7.5 inches for a single gate. And we go about 8 inches, 8.5 for a double gate. Now that we took a look at the hardware from Shark, we're going to go ahead and go over the second talking point, and that is basically what material do we use for the gate and how do we prefabricate the gate to make it easy for the guys to go out in the field and be able to throw it up pretty easily.
All right, guys, one feature I like a lot with Company Cam is they give you a map that has pins for all your projects. I've got a customer that wants to see cedar, pre-stained, walnut fences that we've done recently to get an idea how they look. I pulled up the map icon on my Company Cam project folder, and it's going to show me all of them, but it only shows 50 at a time. So this is 50 of the 420. But because we had the labels that I showed you guys last time, I know there's a label for pre-stained walnut, and it'll show me all the projects that are pre-stained walnut. I can simply click them. I can grab the address and send that to him, or I can download a few photos as a montage, send those to him as well. Company Cam is great for contractors because it makes my job and your job a whole lot easier.
So here we are, part 2 of our talking point. We just got done going over the hinges and the latch, the takeoffs, the differences between the latch of the single and the double gate latch. Now we're going to be talking about basically fabricating the frame of the gate, or the gate in its entirety. Basically what we're going to be doing for this particular demonstration is we're going to be building a 6 foot tall 4-foot wide gate frame. And when I say 6-foot tall gate frame, I actually mean 60 inches, even though that's 5 foot. The reasoning for that is the pickets that we're going to be using are 6 foot. And we basically want our frame to be shorter than that. You know, the bottom of it to come up here and the top to be about here. And that gives you your picket relief, which is roughly 6 inches on the top, 6 inches on the bottom. So for every gate that we make for our guys, we always make them a foot shorter. So for 4-foot fence, it'd be 3 foot tall, and so on and so forth. This particular one we're going to make exactly 4 feet wide, and then they're going to use that for the gate right over on the other side of the property. And they probably set their post, I would imagine, 7.5 or so inches larger than 48 inches to account for the hinge and the latch. So normally what I do is just mark out kind of what I want to do for the frame of the gate. So for this one, like I said, it's going to be 60 inches tall, and it's going to be 48 inches wide. And we use 1.5-inch square tube. I guess really you could use what you had. It's going to really need to be square tube. All the Shark stuff is pretty much built for square material, not necessarily round when it comes to the actual gate frame. And 1.5 inches seems to be the sweet spot. I suppose you could use something a little larger, maybe 2-inch if that's what you had. You really wouldn't want to go any smaller, like 1 inch or so. The reason for that is actually the hinge holes on the side of the hinge, they're actually pretty large. I think the nut is 7/8, so the bolt would be a little shy of that, but 1.5 inches seems to be the sweet spot. That's what we use, and that's what we recommend for the Shark hardware. Now we're going to be looking at the hinge part. They come with the holes drilled into the actual plate. On the back side, they have nuts welded onto them. And so we basically will pre-punch holes into our upright, the distance in between these two, which is about 3.5 inches. That's pretty consistent throughout all the Shark hardware. They do a pretty good job of getting right on the money, so it's very seldom that we have any play off of that, and if it is, it's probably my fault for not drilling it exactly right. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to drill, for this upright, we're going to have two holes on the top for the top hinge, and then we'll do 2 holes on the bottom for the bottom hinge, and that'll be on whatever side you'd like to hinge your gate on. And then the fabrication for the latch is basically going to be in the same square tube, and it'll be basically the distance in between these 2 holes. Now, I don't actually know what that is. We made a little jig here in the shop to make it quick and easy. The drill bit size is 9/32, and when you get the Shark hardware, it's fairly simple to just lay it out on here and take a Sharpie and mark your holes before you drill, and that'll guarantee that you get one dead in the center, and it'll just be easier for you to do it that way. So now that we went over the drilling for the hinge side, we also touched on the latch and what you need to do to drill that. Really the only other thing we do for our gates is we use the 1.5 inch square tube for the rectangle or the square of the gate, and then we like to attach 2x4s to the top and bottom runner of the gate. And so for that, the only thing we do is we'll punch a 3/8 inch hole on either side of the horizontal piece, and we just use like a 3.5 inch carriage bolt to basically bolt the 2x4 to the frame of the gate. And that makes it easy for the guys to go out and still be able to use the nail guns since the 2x4s are already on the gate. The hinge holes I normally will come up from the bottom and go about 8 inches and 11.5. Now that's a distance of 3.5 inches. Does it matter where you put the holes? Yeah and no. You could really put them anywhere. Typically on any gate you'd like one to be towards the bottom and one towards the top. If you get too low and close to the bottom, that could potentially cause some problems. So this we found is a pretty good method for us. We mark 8 inches and 11.5 on both sides, and then the drill bit we use, I'll show you. So this is the drill bit we use. This says 16 millimeter. I believe it's also 5/8 or something close to that. And it really doesn't matter what drill bit you use. We prefer these ones that punch a hole or a ring around instead of just the solid drill bits. They work pretty well. And these are relatively inexpensive and you can find them most places. So that's what we use for the hinge holes. And then for marking the top and the bottom runner for your 2x4s, those really don't matter a whole lot. But again, I try to throw mine about 8 inches in on both pieces, on both sides. And those holes are going to be drilled out with a 3/8 drill bit, and we use a 3/8 by 3.5 inch carriage bolt to attach the 2x4 to the square tube. And then the last one to mark out is the latch. Now for the single latch and the double latch, I guess, basically what we do, if we're going to be doing a 6-foot tall gate, then we're going to want the latch to be roughly about halfway on the gate frame, and that puts it at a comfortable height to grab. If you're going to be doing a 4-foot tall gate for 4-foot fence, you might want to make it a little higher. Basically, you'd want to put them where you think is going to be comfortable, knowing that the actual gate frame is going to sit off the ground 6 inches or more. So for this one, we'll mark it out at 30 inches, which will be half of 60. And then, like I said, I typically just use a spare striker to line it up on my lines and mark a couple of holes. And then that way I have a visual reference to drill the holes. Once I got my latch holes drilled in here, I have just another latch with a couple of bolts in here, and I just put it in here and make sure that the holes are aligned properly, which these ones are, so they'll be good to go. Now that we're done welding the gate frame, the last thing to do before it leaves the shop is to throw 2x4s on it. We're going to go ahead and attach the 2x4s with 3.5 inch by 3/8 carriage bolts right through the 3/8 holes that we drilled on the bottom and top runner. The only other thing to note on these is when you throw your 2x4s on, you want to make sure that they're not sticking out further than they need to be on the side. Since those shark hinges close and they have pretty tight tolerance, you're going to want to get them flush on the outsides of the gate frame. Just got done throwing the 2x4s on. This gate is now ready to go over to the other side of the shop and be hung up, so take it back to you guys.
Thank you, Matt, for that great explanation. Without further ado, let's hang this gate on the post. All right, guys, one important thing to note here. When we drill these holes, we drill them a little bit oversized to make sure everything fits snug and we get it in the first try. Now, we need to make sure when Justin goes to tighten this, he's going to square it up to make sure we've got a nice right angle here. Basically that the hinge pin is square with the frame. If it's off any, this gate's not going to swing free and clear as easily. All All right, so when we were talking about running the rails, we noted there's a little bit of rise here, meaning this rail is just a little bit lower than this rail. What we're gonna do when Justin hangs this gate, he's gonna make sure his top rail here is even with his top rail here, which means it will likely be a little taller than the rail here. If this were an extreme slope, we would custom build this gate. This one's not as extreme, so we're gonna go with the square frame gate. You could always build it to the drop to get exactly the right amount of drop. For this one, we're just gonna match the top of the gate rail with the top of our fence rail. So as we talked about before, you might need to cut these bolts off. Now, we're using an 1.5 inch steel frame. So what we see here is we're gonna have to trim these bolts off flush with the nut. If we don't, and this gate closes, it's gonna hit the other side of the hinge plate, not let it close all the way. These hinges are gonna end up having to be cocked in, and you won't get your full swing on the gate opening. Justin's gonna trim these off. It's gonna sit nice and flush, and then he's gonna set his hinge orientation. All right, so by cutting this out with jigsaw, Justin enabled us to take this picket from flush and suck it in a little bit more. That way we get a bit more coverage, less of a noticeable gap here between the fence picket and the gate picket. So to illustrate this a little bit better, hopefully, this is probably where you'd be at. Now, granted, the boards, you'd want to make sure the boards were plumb and all that, but you'd still have a pretty good opening here. I mean, this is a couple inches if it's anything. Now, through the magic of YouTube editing, I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like when Justin gets these trimmed out and installed perfectly. Just like that, Justin's taking the gap from several inches, 2 or more, to something like a finger width. It's nice and tight. Now, these boards, they're still aging, so they're going to shrink a little bit. This gap might get a little bit larger, but the point is, since he custom cut each picket, we've taken it from several inches down to a fraction of an inch. All right, so for this example, we had a 4 foot wide gate. We made the opening a little bit wider than 4 foot, but the gate frame itself is 4 feet. Now these pickets are 7.5 inches. Could we custom build and custom measure a gate where they worked out perfectly? Absolutely. In this example though, we went with a 4 foot gate because that's what's most common in the industry. So we've got ourselves a gap here, and we've got a couple options. The easy way would be just to put a picket over it, overlap, nail it and go, but it seems like a shortcut. From the backside you still see this gap. The other option is we'll custom cut, dog ear this picket to fill the gap. Now it's important to me not to put the cut picket right at the end. That's where the customer's eye always is, and we like to put it on the end that's furthest away from the latch. If you think about it, when a customer is operating this gate, they're going to be right here. Their eyes are going to be looking at these pickets. That's why these pickets are probably the best pickets in this row of fence. It's where the attention's going to be. So the cut picket will be furthest away from where the attention is, but not on the end. Just like that, gate's done, fence is built. You guys, building a gate in this way, steel hinges, steel frame with steel post, leads to a gate that when we install it, we give it a lifetime workmanship warranty. Things like obviously warping and twisting aren't going to happen. Sagging is a less likely, I mean, never say never sort of thing. But like I said, when Ozark Fence installs this fence with this gate, We give it a lifetime warranty because we know the gate's built solidly. Until next time, I'm Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences make good neighbors, and I'll see you next time.